Hello, sir. Elon Musk was taken aback by the sound of the small voice and stopped walking. He turned around and saw a little kid standing on the cracked sidewalk close to the steps of the church. The boy's jacket was too large for him, his shoes were scuffed, and he held a crumpled toy car in his small hands. Is your name Elon Musk? The child questioned, tilting his head in inquiry. Elon looked around, half expecting someone to be filming this strange meeting, but the street was empty. Yes, I am. Could you tell me your name? The child stepped closer and murmured, Lucas. His voice shook, but it was not because he was afraid. It was because of something more profound. May I ask you something? Elon crouched down a little so that they were at the same level. Of course, he murmured. What are you thinking about? Lucas held the toy vehicle tightly and paused for a moment. Then he inquired, his voice barely above a whisper, Are you familiar with Jesus? Elon was taken by surprise and blinked. Jesus, are you referring to the Bible? The boy nodded. Yeah, are you familiar with him? Elon was unsure of how to answer. This was not a question about rockets or electric vehicles. I know of him, he began cautiously. Why do you want to know? Tears welled up in Lucas's large brown eyes. He pointed to a weak-looking woman who was sitting on a seat outside the church. She was shaking as she adjusted a thin scarf around her neck. That is my grandmother. She is quite ill. Elon followed the boy's gaze, his chest clenching. Lucas continued, his voice shaking. She says Jesus used to help people, and I thought maybe if he came back, he could help her too. Elon felt a lump in his throat. He was a man who took pride in his ability to solve issues, but this was something that could not be fixed with technology or money. Why do you believe that I am able to bring him back? He asked in a gentle manner. Lucas wiped his nose with his sleeve and shrugged. You're the one who makes the impossible possible, aren't you? You created rockets and other things. Perhaps you could do this as well. Elon felt the weight of the youngster's words pressing down on him. He opened his lips to speak, but no words came out. What could he possibly say to a boy whose hope hinged on something he couldn't possibly deliver? Lucas, the grandma shouted out in a shaky voice, sounding both tender and urgent. Lucas turned around and looked back at Elon one more time. Is it possible for you to return him? Elon was unable to respond, and the youngster did not wait for him to do so. He dashed over to his grandmother's side, leaving Elon standing there with the question ringing in his head. Elon stood still on the sidewalk, watching as Lucas ran back to his grandmother. Her frail hand reached out and brushed lightly against the boy's shoulder as he climbed onto the bench beside her. They were talking now, but Elon couldn't hear what they were saying. What struck him was how Lucas leaned into her as if she were his entire world and how she cradled him as if he were hers. Is it possible for you to bring him back? The boy's query hung in the air like smoke. Elon had not spoken, and now the moment had passed, but the question would not leave him alone. He took a hesitant step back, then another before turning and walking away. His mind was racing, and the sound of his own footfall was muted by the heavy burden of what Lucas had asked him. Elon was lost in thought, and the streets were quiet. You're the guy who makes impossible things happen, Lucas had said. That phrase echoed in his mind like a song he couldn't get out of his head. It was true, wasn't it? He had built rockets, cars, and neural interfaces, things that people once thought were the stuff of science fiction. But this wasn't science. It wasn't something you could build in a lab or fund with $1 billion check. It didn't stop there. The boy's face, those wide, hopeful eyes had carved themselves into Elon's memory. The way he had clutched that battered toy car as if it was the only thing in his life that hadn't abandoned him spoke volumes. ETO, Lucas hadn't asked for riches or fame or even a future on Mars. He had asked for one thing, help. Not for himself, but for his grandmother. And it wasn't just any help. He'd asked for Jesus. When Elon arrived at his hotel, the sun had already set, and the small town was bathed in a gentle twilight. The room he had chosen was cozy, a rare break from the sterile environments of corporate offices and laboratories, but it suddenly felt confining. He stood by the window, gazing out at the faint glow of the church in the distance. The boy's words kept echoing in his mind. Why had Lucas singled him out? Elon wasn't religious. He wasn't the kind of person anyone would associate with faith or miracles. And yet, for a boy like Lucas, Elon represented hope not because of who he was, but because of what he could do. Elon ran a hand through his hair and let out a slow breath. You're the guy who makes impossible things happen. That sentence landed on him like a boulder. He was used to pressure. Of course, there was always another project or another impossible goal waiting to be tackled. But this wasn't about space travel or renewable energy. It wasn't about the future of humanity. It was about a grandmother on a bench and a little boy who was desperate enough to believe that Elon Musk could bring back Jesus. He plopped down in the chair next to the window and gazed out at the dark streets below. The room was silent, but his mind was racing. He recalled the look on Lucas's face when he questioned, "Are you Elon Musk?" It had been a look of pure excitement. The moment of wonder had vanished as swiftly as it had appeared, replaced by something far heavier. Faith, However, it was not confidence in God, it was faith in Elon. The youngster had gazed at him as if he were a miracle worker, someone who could connect science and the holy, and perhaps that was what made Elon feel the most uncomfortable, not the question itself, but the calm, unshakable conviction that lay behind it. How could he possibly meet that standard? Elon reclined in his chair and closed his eyes. For a moment, he reflected on everything he had created and all the lives that his work had impacted. He thought about the people who had expressed their gratitude to him for changing the world and for making their lives easier, better, and safer. But this was different. This was not about progress or innovation. It was not about moving forward. It was about going back to something ancient, something eternal, something that was beyond Elon Musk's reach. Yeah, but he was unable to disregard the boy's inquiry. A picture of Lucas and his grandmother sitting outside the church, two little figures in a world that appeared to have overlooked them, was stuck in his mind. Is it possible for you to bring him back? The child was not looking for a lecture or a philosophical debate. He did not care about Elon's opinions on religion or science. He only wanted to know if the man who made impossible things happen could bring back the one person who could rescue the person he loved the most. Elon opened his eyes and looked out at the church. The lights in the stained glass windows were dim, but they were still glowing softly in the darkness. He felt a pull, something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't guilt or obligation, but it was powerful. It was the kind of pull that had driven him to start SpaceX, to dream of Mars, to push boundaries when others told him it couldn't be done. He didn't have an answer for Lucas, not yet. But he also wasn't ready to leave. Elon stood up and put on his coat. The night was cold, but he didn't mind. He needed to see the church again, to stand in the place where Lucas had asked him that impossible question. Maybe, just maybe. The answer was there, waiting for him to find it. The boy's question was not simply a request, it was a challenge. Elon Musk was not the type of person to shy away from a task. On the following morning, Elon Musk found himself walking back toward the church. He hadn't intended to go back, not exactly, but he had been unable to sleep. His thoughts tangled with the weight of Lucas's question. By the time the sun rose, the urge to return was undeniable. Something about that moment, the boy, his grandmother, the quiet desperation in their voices had lodged itself deep. Elon slowed his pace as he rounded the corner and the church came into view. The scene was almost exactly the same as the day before. Lucas and his grandmother were there again, sitting on the same old bench outside the church. The boy's toy car rolled along the wooden slats under his small, careful hands. The woman sat quietly, her face turned toward the sun, as if she were savoring its warmth despite the cool morning air. Elon hesitated for a moment. Why was he even here? He wasn't a man of faith and didn't have answers for Lucas or his grandmother. What did he think he could accomplish by coming back? But then Lucas looked up and saw him. The boy's eyes widened and his face lit up with that same mix of awe and hope. He nudged his grandmother gently. "Grandma, it's that guy," he returned. Elon felt his chest tighten. He waved slightly and proceeded toward them, his movements slow and deliberate, but his thoughts were racing. What was he meant to say? How could he meet the expectations that Ix plainly had for him? Elion arrived at the bench and greeted the grandma with a friendly good morning. Her worn eyes had a glimmer of warmth as he offered her a polite nod. "Good morning," she said it in a gentle voice. Although her voice was weak, it had a warmth that made Elon think of his mother. Lucas sprang up from the bench, holding his toy vehicle tightly. "Did you solve it?" he asked. His words came out in a rush as he inquired. Elon bent down a little to me, the boy's eager eyes. "What do you need to figure out?" Lucas responded, "You said you'd try," as if it were the most simple thing in the world, and then he added, "How to bring Jesus back." The air was thick with anticipation. Elon looked over at the grandmother, wishing for some sort of direction, but she simply gazed back at him with a soft, understanding look on her face. It was not a look of judgment, it was a look of patience, as if she recognized how difficult the situation was, but was grateful that he had returned nevertheless. Elon cleared his throat and looked for the appropriate words. "Lucas, I don't think anyone can bring him back the way you're asking. However, but you're Elon Musk," Lucas interrupted, his little brow furrowing. "He make things happen." The boy's faith in him was astonishing, bordering on overpowering. Elon had always lived on challenges, on being the person others came to when the impossible needed to be done. Probably, but this was not an issue that could be solved with rockets or algorithms. It was something else entirely. Elon said softly, "I can't bring him back," and then added, "But maybe I can help in a different way." Lucas tilted his head, and a look of inquiry appeared in his eyes. "How?" he asked. At last, the grandma spoke. Her voice was soft but calm. "Lucas, dear, Mr. Musk is under no obligation to assist us. He has already accomplished a great deal for the planet. Don't put that kind of pressure on him." He said he'd try. Lucas protested. Looking back at Elon, Elon raised his hand to stop the boy's grandma from saying anything else. It's okay, he replied. Standing up straight, Lucas has a good question, a hard question, and maybe I can't do exactly what he's asking, but I want to understand. I would like to understand why it matters to him so much. Lucas's eyes lit up. He glanced back at his grandma, then at Elon as if he was trying to figure out where to begin. Eventually, he muttered, "Grandma's sick." She's sick. She claims everything is okay and that God has a purpose. However, I do not want her to leave. The grandmother's hands shook in her lap as she let out a gentle sigh. Lucas's voice broke, and his tiny hands turned into fists. "I don't care about plans or waiting," he said. "I want her to remain here." Jesus was constantly there to aid others. That's what you told me, Grandma. So what is stopping him from helping you at this moment? When Lucas spoke, the raw emotion in his voice hit Elon like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just asking for a miracle. He was fighting against the fear of losing the person he loved most in the world. It was a fight Elon recognized, even if the circumstances were different. He'd seen it in his own mother when his father was sick. He'd seen it in himself time and time again. Whenever someone he cared about faced something he couldn't fix. Elon bent down once more and placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "I can't bring Jesus back, Lucas," he whispered in a soothing voice, "but perhaps I can help in some other way. May I give it a shot?" Lucas sniffed, his eyes red, but yet full with that unwavering hope. What do you mean? Elon said, "I don't know yet, but I'm good at things out. Perhaps there's something I can do to assist your grandmother." The child examined him, as if he were trying to determine whether or not he was being honest. After that, he nodded and wiped his nose with the sleeve of his oversized jacket. "Okay," he said. Elon and the grandmother exchanged glances, and she smiled weakly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. "You didn't have to come back, but you did. That has significance." That morning, as Elon left the church, he felt the same urge to take on a challenge. This challenge was not related to technology or ambition. It was something far more personal. He was uncertain about what he could achieve. But he was certain of one thing: he could not let Lucas down. Elon Musk was not thinking about the future for the first time in years. Instead, he was focused on the present and on a little boy who thought that he could make miracles happen. As Elon walked away from the chapel, he could still hear Lucas's words in his head. "Can you bring him back?" It was no longer just a question. It seemed like a challenge that he couldn't ignore. The boy's grandma was weak, and the youngster himself was filled with a steadfast hope. These two things sparked something deep inside him. But how do you even begin to ask a question like that? That notion stayed with him all the way back to the cottage he was renting. He slumped onto a chair by the window and stared out at the calm street. Sunlight seeped through the curtains, giving a pleasant glow to the room. But Elon felt restless and uncomfortable. His life had always been about overcoming impossible issues, but this was new terrain for him. He hesitated for a while before dialing a number on his phone. When the call connected, he heard a voice he recognized. "Hey, Elon, what's going on?" He frequently sought guidance from this person who was one of his most trusted confidants. Elon didn't waste any time. Has anyone ever asked you a question that left you completely stumped? On the other end, someone chuckled. "You're Elon Musk? I was under the impression that you had all the answers." Elon chuckled dryly. "Not this time. A child asked me if I could bring Jesus back." There was a little pause on the other end. Then, "Wow, that's a lot." "Yeah," Elon responded, scratching his temples. "I told him I was unable to do that. However, I made a pledge to do my best to assist his grandmother. She is ill, and they do not have a lot. What are your plans?" Elon said, "That's the issue. I don't have an answer at this time." The question weighed heavily on him, preventing him from getting any rest. He started doing research late into the night, looking into the town, the availability of healthcare in the area, and anything else that could provide him with a hint. He was not attempting to accomplish a miracle, but he was committed to discovering a method to make a difference. As the hours passed, Elon felt a change within himself. This was not about celebrity or plaudits. It was about assisting one small kid and his grandma here and now, and maybe that was enough to start with. Elon Musk had a plan, or at least the beginnings of one, by the time the morning light streamed through the windows of the cabin. The hours he had spent researching had not produced a miracle, but they had revealed something else. The harsh reality of life in this small town. There were limited healthcare options, scarce resources, and too many families like Lucas's struggling to make ends meet. Elon felt the weight of it, but it also gave him direction. His conversation with Lucas and his grandmother the day before had shown him that this was not just about one boy's question. It was about the bigger picture, the real-world struggles hiding behind the simplicity of Lucas's faith. This is like, if he couldn't answer the boy's impossible question, maybe he could at least address the problem that inspired it. Lucas was outside when Elon came back to the church just after the morning service was over. He was sitting on the same bench with his toy car teetering on the edge when he saw Elon coming. His face brightened up with that usual feeling of hope. "You're back!" Lucas jumped up and shouted. His grandma, who was seated next to him, smiled at Elon in a friendly but careful way. Elon crouched down to Lucas's height and stated, "I told you I'd try." Have you solved it?" Lucas asked with excitement. Ellie was unsure. He wanted to be truthful without breaking the boy's spirit. "Lucas, I can't bring Jesus back, but I've been thinking a lot about how I can help your grandma, and I think I might have an idea." Lucas was curious and tilted his head. What type of idea?" "I discovered that there is a clinic nearby, but they do not have sufficient resources. They're unable to assist everyone who requires help. Therefore, I will ensure that they are able to assist your grandmother, and other individuals as well." The grandmother's eyes were wide with surprise as she leaned forward. "Would you really do that?" she asked in a gentle voice. Elon gave a nod. "Yes, I can't guarantee that everything will be perfect, but I can guarantee that things will improve." "But why is that? Why would you go out of your way for us?" she questioned, her voice shaking. Elon stood up and looked her in the eye. "Because Lucas taught me that sometimes the most important problems are not about the future. They are about the current events. And if I am capable of doing anything, I ought to do it." For Elon, this moment seemed more significant than anything he had gone through in a long time. As it wasn't about a commercial deal or a headline-making feat, it was about a promise he had made to a little boy who had the courage to believe in him. However, when Lucas's grandma started to express her gratitude to him, Elon raised a hand in a gentle manner. "Don't thank me just yet," he remarked. "There is still a lot of work to be done." He spent the rest of the day making phone calls and reaching out to local leaders, medical professionals, and organizations that could provide assistance. His name held a lot of influence, and soon things started to come together. Donations of equipment were organized, specialists volunteered their time, and the local clinic agreed to expand its services. Elon offered to fund the entire effort, making sure that the changes would not be temporary. Elon went back to the chapel that evening. Lucas was there waiting for him as if he had never left. "Did you complete it?" Lucas inquired, his voice humming with eagerness. Elon had a smile on his face. I began. "Your granny will see the care she requires, but it will take a little while." Elon was looking down at Lucas, who was gazing up at him with a wrinkled face and sparkling eyes. "You weren't able to resurrect Jesus." Elon bent down once more and placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "No, Lucas, I can't bring him back. However, there are moments when we can assist others in the same way that Jesus did." Lucas's face lit up with understanding, and for the first time, Elon felt like he had given the youngster an answer, not the one he'd hoped for, but maybe the one he needed. That night, as Elon was leaving the church, he had an important realization. The boy's question had not only challenged him, it had also changed him. It reminded him that even in a world of science and technology, some of the most important answers were not about what you could invent, but about what you could give. And for now, that was enough. The next several days were a flurry of activity. After speaking with Lucas, Elon dove headfirst into his proposal with the same type of intensity that had previously helped him build rockets and send automobiles into space. However, this time it was not about pushing the limits of technology, it was about reaching out to individuals who had been overlooked. Elon made the town's small clinic his new project. Within hours of his calls, trucks were on their way, carrying medical supplies and equipment that the staff could only dream of. A team of doctors and nurses was organized to volunteer their time, providing much-needed expertise. Innovation crews arrived to repair the crumbling building, turning it into a space worthy of the people it would serve. Elon was not simply a background figure. He was present in the clinic, standing there as the deliveries arrived, observing the exhausted staff, people who had been overworked for years, beginning to smile again. He talked with them, listened to their experiences, and started to understand the larger context. It was no longer only about Lucas's grandma. It was about all the people in this small village who had been suffering in silence, waiting for aid that never arrived. Elon returned to the church 2 days after the first supplies arrived. This time, he was not just greeted by Lucas and his grandmother. A small group of people from the town had gathered there, having heard about the situation. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope, as if they were having trouble believing that someone like Elon Musk would care about their little corner of the world. Mills was the first to run up to him, still holding his toy car. "Is it prepared?" he questioned, his voice brimming with eagerness. "Almost," Elon said, smiling. "The clinic is getting a big upgrade, and your grandma will be one of the first people to see the new doctor." Lucas's smile was as big as the sky, and he was beaming. "I told Grandma that you would get it done." Elon walked toward the bench where Lucas's grandmother was sitting. She was having a hard time getting up, but she was able to do so with the help of her cane. As she said, her voice shook. "Mr. Musk, I don't know how to express my gratitude to you. No one has ever done more. for our town than what you are doing. Elon spoke in a soft but serious voice, saying, "You don't have to thank me. This isn't about me. It is about ensuring that you and everyone else here receive the assistance that you all deserve." Tears sparkled in the grandmother's eyes. "You have restored our hope. That is a significant matter." The sound of church bells ringing disrupted the moment, their tones filling the cool afternoon air. Lucas peered up at Elon and tugged on his jacket with his small hand. "Does this mean you are similar to Jesus now?" Elon crouched down to meet Lucas's gaze and chuckled softly. "Lucas, no, I'm simply a regular person doing my best to help out. But do you know what? You taught me something significant." "What?" Lucas asked, his eyes wide open. Elon remarked, "You don't always need a miracle to make a difference. Sometimes you just need to care enough to do something." Lucas appeared to think about this for a moment before giving a serious nod. "According to Grandma, Jesus was very concerned about people." Elon responded, "She is correct. Perhaps we can all learn something from that." The town underwent a noticeable transformation in the days that followed. The clinic was bustling with activity, and for the first time in years, people were able to receive the care they needed. Elon ensured that Lucas's grandmother received a complete checkup, and when the doctors reported that her condition was treatable, the relief on Lucas's face made all of the effort worthwhile. However, it wasn't just the clinic that was affected. Elon's actions inspired others in the town to take action as well. Volunteers offered their time to help keep the clinic running smoothly. Local businesses donated food and supplies to support families in need. It was as if Elon's presence had sparked a fire. Now the entire town was glowing with new energy. Elon was walking through the streets one evening when he observed Lucas playing with his toy car in front of his house. The youngster glanced up and waved, screaming, "Thank you, Mr. Elon." Elon waved back, a rare smile pulling at his lips. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. For the first time, he felt like he had made a difference, not by going after the stars, but by helping people here on Earth. And that, he realized, might be the greatest accomplishment of all. Elon Musk had a significant realization as the town clinic began to operate. The true miracle was not in the technology, but in the way that people came together. The clinic's transformation was not simply due to the new equipment or the volunteer doctors. It was about the spirit it inspired in the community. It was about hope. Elon came back to the church a week after his first visit. This time, the atmosphere was different. Lucas and his grandma were there as usual, but they were not the only ones. The bench outside the church was surrounded by other families and neighbors who had come to witness the guy who had transformed their town. Lucas came up to him, twirling his toy vehicle in his hands. "Grandma is doing better," he said with a voice full of happiness. "The doctor said she's going to be okay." Elon crouched down to meet Lucas's gaze and said, "That's wonderful news. How do you feel about it?" Lucas smiled, grateful and joyful. "According to Grandma, we prayed for assistance, and then you arrived. According to her, perhaps God sent you." Elon was unsure of how to respond to that. He looked over at the grandmother, who was watching him with a gentle smile and her hands clasped in her lap. Her health was already improving, her posture was straighter, and her movements were steadier. She had seen the doctor twice since the clinic reopened, and with proper care, she was finally on the path to recovery. Elon stood and gazed out at the audience that was gathering. Their faces were a combination of thankfulness and calm astonishment, as if they still couldn't comprehend what had happened. Meanwhile, Lucas was pulling on his sleeve. Elon spoke to them, saying, "I didn't do this by myself. This is about all of you coming together and supporting one another. That is what gives a community its strength." Then the grandmother spoke up, her voice calm and steady. "Mr. Musk, you gave us hope. Not sometimes. That's the only miracle people need," someone said. Elon bowed, feeling humbled. For the first time, he understood that the boy's inquiry, "Can you bring him back?" was not about something that could not be done. It was about putting faith into action, being present, and caring enough to make a difference. And at that moment, Elon realized what was happening. As said, it is possible that he had not returned Jesus, but through Lucas's unshakable faith, he had discovered a means to embody the same spirit of compassion and love that the youngster had been looking for all along. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the solution that Lucas was looking for. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and for sharing in this powerful story of compassion and hope. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe to Velvet Sovereigns. Stay tuned for more inspiring and thought-provoking stories that remind us all of the incredible impact we can have when we choose to care. Together, let's explore the moments that shape lives and bring communities together. See you in the next story.